Happy holidays. Welcome back to Story Mantra. I'm Lindsay Preston here with my co-host Andrew Gattani, and we welcome back Priscilla Oliveras. We're so excited to have you back again today. Thank you for joining us again.
So in the holiday spirit, I'd like to introduce Priscilla again. What an honor to let you all know that she is a USA Today bestselling author and a 2018 RW Rita double finalist who writes contemporary romance with a Latinx flavor. She's earned recognition in the Washington Post, New York Times, Entertainment Weekly, Redbook, and Publishers Weekly with her latest novel, Island Affair, making the Oprah Magazine's 28 of the best beach reads of summer 2020. Can we see that cover, please?
Sure, it's this
one. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous
they
cover.
Did a great job. And they've done an awesome job also with the cover for book 2 that comes out.
Do we have that?
I can show it to you. Let me see. Here it is. I'm trying to bring
a
it up on my
romance genre junkie. Priscilla is also a sports fan, beach lover, Zumba aficionado. There's a cover. Oh, it is pretty.
It's so they did a fun job. Like they did a nice job with the island.
I need a colada with that.
Yes.
And she is most of all a hammock nap connoisseur. Can you believe that?
Hammock naps are very important. They are very important for self-care.
Self-care. And if you look below the video, you'll see the links to Priscilla's website, the links to purchase her books. And of course, she is also, very, very versed in writing a series, which I thought would be great to catch up on. So Lindsay, where should we kick off? Because Priscilla has so much to teach us.
Yes, it really does. I mean, we did a great job kind of talking about how we put these great characters in these settings. Now, the other thing that you do that's really interesting with your series is you follow not just one main character. This is a family. Can you tell us what it's like to create a family for a series and how you have to think about for writing for book 2 and book 3 and so on?
Sure. I think, like we kind of mentioned before, I write with a lot of familia themes. And so in my series, and I'll say in romance, particularly, a lot of readers, I myself as a reader, enjoy reading a series because I feel like then I get to touch base with characters that were maybe the main characters in previous books, and I get to kind of see where they are in their relationship in a later book.
So a quick question for our newbie writers. When you say family themes, what does that mean to a new writer who's starting off?
Oh, sure. Well, so my books, I don't write a lot of, they're not saving the world, right? And they're not out racing after like big drug dealers. There's not a lot of the themes and the issues and the conflicts that my characters mostly face are like everyday issues that we would deal with our family and in our daily lives. And because I write Latinx romance, so Latino, some people might say Latinx is a relatively newer term to be all-inclusive, but because I write with Latinx characters, we tend to in our culture have a lot, whether we do a lot of things with our familia or if you're not close with your familia, you create like a community, a comunidad. And so a lot of in my books, we deal with, like, we'll meet in book 1 the familia. And so like for my first series, the Match to Perfection series, you meet right away in book 1 the Fernandez sisters. Book 1 is all about Yasmin and Tomas's romance, but throughout the book, they'll have like familia dinners, or she'll be on the phone with her sisters. Lili, who is book 3, she talks about how her sisters are in her business, whether she wants them to be or not. That's just kind of how familia is. And the same thing in Island Affair. In book 1, well, this series takes place in Chicago, the Match to Perfection. Island Affair, I get to take readers home with me to Key West, where I lived throughout my junior high and high school. And you meet the Navarro familia, they're Cuban familia. So I will point out that the Match to Perfection series and Resort to Love are own voices because they're Puerto Rican and I'm Puerto Rican Mexican. Island Affair, I do not ever market or say its own voices because I'm not Cuban. So that's like, to me, that's an important distinction to make for those who are not as familiar with the own voices. We use Latinx romance authors, we use the Latinx ROM hashtag. So I always tag it with that. But in Island Affair, book one, you meet the Navarro familia. And so the book is all about the romance between Luis, the second oldest Navarro son, and Sarah, that she's a social media influencer who is on the island for a week-long vacation with her kind of judgmental family. So it's their romance, but like in the Navarro familia, mommy, every week there's mandatory Navarro familia dinner. Now the siblings and their father are all firefighter paramedics, so that dinner night might change based on their shift, and that's something that they talk about. But what I enjoy as a writer, what I enjoy, but also what can be a challenge is kind of what you talked about, is how can you create them? How can you keep track of them? And I learned with the Fernandez sisters in the Match Perfection series. Like I have a Bible, I write in Scrivener. So there is information that goes from one Scrivener file to another. I also have like this notebook right here. I started with Island Affair. And so inside this notebook I have, because sometimes it's easier for me. And so I guess you find your style as a writer and whatever is going to help for your process. But for me, it was easier to write down and then transfer into Scrivener. Or at least sometimes when I feel like I'm hitting a wall, or I need to step away from my laptop. And so, writing but you'll find in here like the Navarro familia tree. I have like when each of the siblings graduated from Key West High, and when important events happened in their life, because what we were discussing earlier off screen or whatever, in the Match Perfection series, Lily's book, so that's book 3, takes place 4 years after the start of the series. So I needed to remember when I started writing Lily's book, what had happened in Yasmin and Tomas's relationship. We knew they were married because at the beginning of book 2, Her Perfect Affair, Rose's book, we're at the wedding reception for Tomas and Yasmin. So we know they're married, but by the time I got to Lily's book, it was fun because I got to, now they have another son. Yasmin and Tomas might have another child, and Rosa and Jeremy, they have one child because that's they get together right off the bat, and that's a surprise pregnancy. But guess what? By the time Lily's book rolls around, they have another one. And so for me as a writer, it was fun, and I hope as a reader you get to see the Fernandez familia growing. And in Holiday, it's not up there because it's not. Where is it? Holiday Home Run is in the Fern Michaels, but it's also digital. That book got sandwiched in between book 2 and 3. And so the way the timing all worked out, as a writer, I guess this is kind of some advice that I could pass along for traditional published authors, because as an indie published author, you can put your books out, whenever you want, what works for you and your schedule. As a traditional published author, I'm beholden to my publisher and their schedule. Kensington approached me about writing the holiday novella, Holiday Home Run, and I was in the middle of books 2 and 3. I right now I have to like stop and look at think back to that calendar and where I was, but I do know that it was hurricane season because my sister and I brainstormed the story for Holiday Home Run over a hurricane weekend that I was stuck inside. But because I knew when they told me here's when it's going to release, and it was going to release before book 3. So in the Fernandez familia timeline, then I had plotted out like these 3 books, and then all of a sudden there was going to be a novella that needed to go in between. So I had actually already written and turned in book 3, but then during revisions, there was a scene and I added Julia, and I added like mentions of Julia throughout because I knew that when book 3 came out, the novella would have already happened. So Julia would be in the sisters' lives and she would be living in Chicago by then. So I needed to add her to that story. So then when I was plotting Julia's story, she was here, she comes to Chicago for an internship. She needs a place to stay. I had her living with Lily. And then that way readers could meet Lily. And my hope as an author was readers would they already met her in the 2 books, but they could really get to know her again. And hopefully if they bought the anthology because of Fern Michaels or Kate Pierce or Donna Kaufman, who are much more well-known than I was. So if I was a new to them author and they liked my holiday novella, hopefully they would also like Lily and go buy Lily's book, which was coming out next month.
How do you keep track of all these characters and the momentum of the book, you've got main characters, you've got secondary characters, you've got supporting characters. And I can understand that the supporting characters don't have to grow. They're there. But how do you keep track of the growth of the main characters and clearly the growth of your secondary characters as well? How do you handle all of that?
I think for me, it's just, I'm really character driven as a reader. Like the 99% of the books that are on my keeper shelf are there because those characters feel like real people to me and I want to touch base with them again. So like if I'm dusting in that room, don't be surprised if you come back an hour later and I'm sitting on the floor now and I've like taken down one of the books and I just opened it and I'm reading a chapter because I want to say hello to. That happens a lot with Cosmo Richter. He's my book boyfriend from Suzanne Brockman's Troubleshooter series, which is a fabulous series, a fabulous example of writing series. Suzanne Brockman as an adult, me as an adult reader, is the hallmark for me of how to write series and incorporate a bunch of secondary characters that cannot take over the story, because that's what you have to be careful of, is that you want your secondary characters to make a mark, or at least to be interesting enough to your readers that they want their story in another book. They cannot take over, like I had to make sure while writing book one, that Lily or Rosa didn't take over. Yasmin is such a strong character that wasn't a problem. But I will tell you that in my first draft it wasn't my first draft, but by the time my book got to my agent, one of the things she mentioned is that Lily came on really strong and Rosa is so quiet that I was letting Rosa kind of disappear and she maybe not be as interesting. And she was who I had as the main love interest or the main sister for book 2. And so I had to make Rosa a little more interesting. I feel so bad saying that now because I love Rosa and I was not doing her justice in those first drafts. But for me, it's about keeping track of things. Like I said, I have them in my notebook, in Scrivener. I have ideas and pictures of what they all look like, who they all are, and just trying to keep my characters a lot, for me, become, as crazy as it sounds, like real people, right? So we talk to them. Diego is giving me a hard time about a scene, and so he's riding shotgun with me while I'm driving to campus, so I can talk to him about, dude, what is your problem, right? So I have those kinds of conversations. So hopefully that's what helps me to keep, I don't want to say keep track, but to be enmeshed in their lives enough that even though this book is not about these two characters, I kind of still have an idea of what's going on in their head and what's, that I can make them interesting enough in this book, and then really deep dive into them in their own story.
Wow.
And you know what? We have time for one more question. I know we could
That's
talk
it?
for hours. I know. Isn't it crazy?
Maybe I'm talking too much.
No.
Great. I mean, the amount of information you're providing is so.
And I'm just thinking out loud. Well, really, this is how you navigate and how you do it all, because, when you work on a series and your own series, you kind of forget about what it is from the outside approach.
Right.
So,
or we learn from each other,
Yeah.
So maybe something you're doing would be helpful to my process.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and especially like Lindsay and I were talking about before, just bringing in the culture as well, because that carries on throughout the series.
And you do a beautiful job in your books with that too.
Yeah, well, thank you. But I find my work like mundane because I've been doing it for so long now and developing this series for 20 years. So for me, it's like, it's revisiting somebody I've, been with for so long. So when I hear Priscilla talk, it's like, oh, this is a whole new exciting thing, and it sounds fun when I hear her talk about it.
Yeah, your books, I mean, are fantastic, and it's been so interesting having you. And I think we could get so much more from you, but because we don't have time, what would you tell someone starting off who wants to write a romance series, something set into the holiday? If you could leave just 1-2 pieces of advice, what would that be?
Oh my goodness. So so a romance, that's a series that's set in the holiday. I think it just, for me, I guess that would be, like the first 3 the first two books in the series, and then the anthologies. The anthology, definitely, the novella Holiday Home Run is definitely in the. For me, I take it back to, I focus on the characters and think about what is it, what's their, like all those aspects. What are the characters? What's their wound? Meaning, think about where they are at the beginning and where it is that, so how they need to grow and what they need to experience or what they need to learn. Because even if they're good people at the beginning, so like Rosa and Jeremy were kind of hard for me to write because they were nice people and I just wanted them to be happy. There's something off. There's something not quite right. There's something missing or something that they need, even if they don't know it at the beginning. You as the author want to know it, because then that will help you and if you're trying to write a series, then that will have to be for all of your characters, even if like I didn't know everything about Lily because she was book 3. And frankly, what I thought I knew about Lily when I was writing book 1, a lot of that changed by the time I got to her book. And that's okay, because I wasn't writing her book before. And, I just needed to keep in mind that whatever you write in a book that you release, then you're kind of held to it, unless there's some way that you can say how they changed or, right? But unless you're right, well, like in a telenovela, like, yeah, people come back from the dead. I don't write paranormal, so I've never brought anybody back from the dead. So if you're writing a subgenre, maybe then the door is a little bit wider for you. But as a plain contemporary romance author, I'm not bringing anybody back from the dead.
I'm bringing in dead people.
Yeah, right. So whatever. Like initially, Lily was going to be like a vet tech, and you learn she's a victims advocate. So thank God I did not say she was majoring that because she was in college, or else I would have then had to say Lily later decided to change her major, right? And so that is something to keep in mind. The more that you can try to look at your series, like where you want it to go, then better. But that doesn't mean so many. At the same time, I don't want a writer to think, oh my gosh, I got to plot out my whole like 5-book series if I've got 5 siblings. No, because I've heard plenty of writers like Brenda Jackson, who's written over 100 books, has said she wrote, she had a couple books, or she would have a few books planned, and then a whole other like series or like an extension happened because one sibling happened to, like that in that sibling's book, she introduced some of his friends, and readers were like, oh, I want those people's books, and so it can morph. So
that's kind of like spin-offs, isn't it?
Yeah, so you could wind up with spin-offs that you haven't even planned. So I don't want anybody to leave thinking I got to plan everything out. But for your first book, as much as you can have a feel for, those other people that are important in their lives, whether they're blood family or they're found family, like in Resort to Love, they're best friends. In the anthology that's coming out that I'm having June, it's 3 best friends. So they're not related by blood, but it's just.
This is June 2021, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say, and if you're adding that holiday aspect, then it's just, again, think about how the situations in the holiday can add to your story, whether it's adding for romantic, meet cutes, whether it's adding conflict, anything like that should be, because it's adding depth. It's not just adding fluff. To your story. So I guess I would take it all back to think about your characters and the situations they need to be in, and how those situations can challenge them and enrich them and get them to where they need to go, and how your secondary characters that you might want to write stories about can be woven believably into that that main story.
You also teach, Priscilla, don't you? Could you tell us really quickly about that?
Sure. I have, it's a continuing education course. It's called Romance Writing. So we go over, it's 12 lessons over the course of 8 weeks. Each Wednesday and Friday, a lesson goes live, and you have like 2 weeks to do the lesson. I'll be honest and say, over pandemic, I'm leaving the lessons open. And I'm not, so my students have longer than 2 weeks just because life. But we cover a lot of the foundational. We go over character and plotting and GMC, which is goal, motivation, conflict, and emotion. found so that my hope is that students will leave with a stronger foundation of key elements that can help them. All of our goal is to write a keeper shelf novel. So I'm not guaranteeing that you'll finish having written one, but you will have learned some foundational elements and aspects, like tips and tools that can help you along your writing path. That's with Cengage Learning. It's ed, the number 2 go. So you can go to ed2go.com, and the class is romance writing.
And we'll have that link below the video as well. So for anybody who wants to sign up, get started writing, Priscilla's your lady to take the lead.
Oh, thank you.
You've been a delight to have on. Happy holidays to you and your family, and happy holidays to everybody out there. And go buy Priscilla's books for Christmas gifts. They're perfect.
Yes. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you so much, Priscilla, for joining us and showing writers the path as well.
Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.